The grand assembly hall of the Galactic Council stretched across 3 kilometers of polished crystalline floor, its vaulted ceiling displaying a holographic map of conquered star systems. Today's agenda item number 47, reviewing membership applications from primitive civilizations. Chairman Quilnox, a 7-foot-tall avian creature whose iridescent feathers practically screamed "I'm important," adjusted his ceremonial robes and cleared his throat with a sound like grinding metal. Distinguished colleagues, we now consider the application from Sol 3, colloquially known as Earth. Ambassador Vex Tar slithered to the speaking podium, his reptilian scales catching the artificial starlight. His forked tongue flicked out as he consulted his datapad with the enthusiasm of someone about to share gossip at a dinner party. Honored council members, Vex Tar began, his voice dripping with barely contained amusement. I present to you the most entertaining application we've received in centuries. The species calls itself Homo sapiens, though the sapiens part is clearly aspirational. Scattered chuckles echoed through the assembly as holographic displays materialized around the chamber, showing primitive spacecraft held together with what appeared to be metal tape, nuclear weapons pointed at their own planet, then footage of humans arguing about whether the planet was round. Their space travel technology, Vex Tar continued, his tail swishing with delight, consists of controlled explosions. They literally blow things up to achieve orbit. Their fastest vessel would take 12,000 years to reach our nearest outpost. Counselor Bleep Nick, a chrome-plated artificial intelligence whose body resembled a geometric fever dream, processed the data with mechanical precision. Statistical analysis confirms their technological development places them at 0.7 on the Kardashev scale. My calculations indicate a 97.3% probability of self-extinction within 2 centuries. But wait, Vex Tar raised a clawed hand dramatically. It gets better. Their historical records show continuous warfare for their entire documented existence. They've weaponized everything from pointed sticks to split atoms, and they've never met a problem they couldn't solve by hitting it harder. The holodisplays shifted to show human conflicts throughout history, each more chaotic than the last. Several council members clutched their breathing apparatus in what passed for laughter among their species. Their diplomatic approach, Vex Tar's eyes gleamed with malicious joy, consists primarily of shouting at each other until someone gives up or explodes. They have over 7,000 languages and spend most of their time arguing about which invisible sky deity loves them most. Chairman Quilnox nodded sagely, his beak clicking with approval. And their scientific achievements? They discovered fire approximately 50,000 years ago and still consider it high technology. They only recently figured out that washing their hands prevents disease, and half their population still believes their planet is flat despite having photographic evidence to the contrary. The assembly erupted in what could generously be called laughter, if you ignored the sounds of dying machinery and screeching metal. Even the normally stoic crystalline collective representatives were vibrating with amusement. Counselor Bleep Nick's optical sensors flickered. Additional data point, they consumed liquid ethanol for recreational purposes, deliberately impairing their already limited cognitive functions. In conclusion, Vex Tar spread his arms wide like a carnival barker. I recommend we file this application under cosmic comedy and send them a polite rejection. Perhaps we can revisit their case in a few millennia, assuming they haven't accidentally set their atmosphere on fire by then. Chairman Quilnox called for a vote with all the solemnity of someone ordering lunch. All in favor of rejection? Every appendage, tentacle, and mechanical limb in the chamber raised in unanimous agreement. Motion carried. Send them our standard rejection template, the one about letting developing species mature in their natural environment. Quilnox's voice carried the condescending tone of an adult explaining why children can't play with sharp objects. As the holographic displays faded and the council moved on to more serious matters, none of them noticed the small recording device that had been quietly documenting their proceedings. After all, what could primitive humans possibly do with the knowledge that the galaxy's most powerful civilizations considered them a cosmic joke? They were about to find out. Captain Jake Morrison sat in the command chair of the Darwin's Revenge, reading the council's rejection letter with all the emotional investment of someone checking their grocery receipt. The ship itself looked like it had been assembled by enthusiastic children with access to a military surplus store, which wasn't far from the truth. "Well, that's adorable," Jake said, his voice carrying the flat tone of someone who'd just been told the sky was blue. "They think we're too primitive for their little space club." Murphy, the ship's AI, materialized as a hologram wearing what appeared to be a digital bow tie. "Captain, I've analyzed their rejection criteria. Apparently, our controlled explosion propulsion system lacks sophistication. I'm tempted to point out that controlled explosions built their entire civilization, but I doubt they'd appreciate the irony." "Read me the good parts, Murphy. Quote, your species shows promising potential, but requires additional development time before joining galactic society." End quote. It's the diplomatic equivalent of patting us on the head and telling us to run along and play. Jake leaned back in his chair, studying the star charts floating in front of him. The Kepler system blinked red on the display, marked as a no-go zone for the past 3 years. 3 different advanced civilizations had tried and failed to solve what they diplomatically called the Kepler asteroid crisis. "Murphy, what's the situation in Kepler again?" "The asteroid belt has gone rogue due to gravitational anomalies from a collapsed star. The debris field is blocking access to 17 mining colonies, and the gravitational flux makes traditional tractor beam technology useless. The Zephyrian Mining Consortium estimates it would take 50 years to clear using conventional methods. And the Council's best and brightest gave up because," quote from the official report, "the chaotic nature of the gravitational matrix defies predictable modeling." Unquote. Essentially, they can't solve it because their computers can't calculate every possible variable. Jake smiled the kind of smile that usually preceded something inadvisable. "Set course for Kepler." "And Murphy?" "Yes, Captain?" "Fire up the fabrication unit. We're going to need a lot of duct tape." The Darwin's Revenge arrived at the Kepler system 18 hours later, and Jake had to admit the sight was impressive. Billions of asteroids danced in chaotic patterns around the gravity well, creating a 3-dimensional maze that shifted every few seconds. It looked like someone had put a solar system in a blender and hit puree. "Scanning the debris field now," Murphy reported. "Gravitational readings are, well, they're basically telling physics to go sit in the corner and think about what it's done." "Any pattern to the chaos?" "That's the thing, Captain. There is no pattern. The gravitational flux is completely random, which is why the Council's predictive algorithms failed. They were trying to solve a math problem that doesn't have a mathematical solution." Jake studied the swirling asteroids for a moment, then started laughing. "Murphy, they're not trying to solve chaos. They're trying to predict it." "I fail to see the distinction. Prediction requires understanding the rules. But chaos doesn't have rules. It just has tendencies." Jake's fingers flew over the control panel. "We're not going to predict where the asteroids will be. We're going to herd them where we want them to go." Over the next 6 hours, Jake and his crew deployed a network of what could only be described as cosmic cattle prods, electromagnetic pulse generators that didn't control the asteroids so much as suggest they might want to drift in a particular direction. It was less precision engineering and more aggressive feng shui. "Captain," Murphy's voice carried a note of what might have been admiration, "you're treating a gravitational crisis like a traffic jam." "That's because it is a traffic jam. Just in 3 dimensions with rocks that weigh a few billion tons each." The electromagnetic herding system worked exactly as well as any reasonable person would expect, which is to say it shouldn't have worked at all. But the asteroids, apparently as confused by the approach as everyone else, began drifting into something resembling organized lanes. Within 24 hours, the Darwin's Revenge had carved 17 clear corridors through the debris field, each one held stable by a combination of electromagnetic guidance and what Jake called optimistic thinking. The rescue ships from the trapped colonies began moving through the corridors immediately, their captains sending messages that ranged from grateful to bewildered to slightly terrified. "Murphy, make sure you're recording all of this." "Already done, Captain. I've also taken the liberty of sending copies to the Galactic Council with a note that says, quote, 'Thanks for the input. We'll keep working on that maturity thing,' end quote." Jake watched the last rescue ship clear the debris field and disappear into hyperspace. You know what the best part about this is? That we just solved a 3-year crisis in under 2 days using electromagnetic cattle prods and duct tape? No. The best part is that somewhere in the galaxy, Ambassador Vextar is about to have a very bad day. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened with all the dignity of a fire drill at a retirement home. Chairman Quilnox's feathers were literally ruffled as he called the assembly to order, his usual pompous demeanor replaced by something approaching panic. Colleagues, Quilnox began, his voice cracking slightly, we have a situation. The humans have done something. The holographic displays flickered to life, showing the Kepler system in its new, inexplicably organized state. 17 perfectly clear corridors cut through what had been absolute chaos just days before. Ambassador Vextar slithered to his position with considerably less enthusiasm than usual. The Kepler mining crisis has been resolved. The humans used what they call electromagnetic herding to organize the debris field. Electromagnetic herding? Counselor Bleep Nick's optical sensors flashed in rapid succession. That's not a recognized technique in any of our databases. That's because they made it up. Vextar's tail twitched with agitation. They treated a gravitational anomaly like a livestock management problem. Before anyone could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the assembly hall. The central communications array crackled to life with an emergency transmission from the Zephyrian colonies. Galactic Council. This is colony ship Meridian. We're caught in the event horizon of an uncharted black hole. Our engines are failing, and we're being pulled in. We have 40,000 souls on board. Please advise. The transmission cut to static, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. Black hole rescues were theoretically impossible. The gravitational forces involved made any rescue attempt equivalent to cosmic suicide. Counselor Bleep Nick ran rapid calculations. The Meridian's trajectory indicates they have approximately 18 hours before crossing the point of no return. All conventional rescue scenarios result in the loss of both the colony ship and any rescue vessels. Then we must accept the loss and focus on evacuation of the outer colonies, Chairman Quilnox said with the tone of someone trying to convince himself this was reasonable. The communications array crackled again. This time it was a different voice, casual and relaxed, with the kind of accent that suggested its owner had never met a problem that couldn't be solved with sufficient application of creativity and questionable judgment. Galactic Council, this is Captain Morrison of the Darwin's Revenge. We copy the Meridian's distress call. Permission to attempt rescue operation. The assembly erupted in what could charitably be called discussion, but sounded more like the contents of several zoos having a territorial dispute. Absolutely not. Vextar's voice cut through the chaos. We will not authorize a suicide mission by primitives who don't understand the forces involved. Actually, Jake's voice came back with infuriating calm. We understand black holes just fine. We even have a song about them. Want to hear it? This is not the time for human frivolity, Chairman Quilnox screeched. Right, serious time. Murphy, prep the gravity slingshot. Already on it, Captain. Though I should point out that using a black hole as a gravity slingshot violates approximately 47 laws of physics and several intergalactic treaties. Good thing we're not members of the club yet. What happened next entered galactic history, as either the most brilliant rescue operation ever attempted or the most successful accident in recorded space travel. The Darwin's Revenge used the black hole's own gravity well as a propulsion system, essentially falling toward the event horizon to build up enough velocity to match the Meridian's trajectory. At the precise moment when both ships should have been crushed beyond recovery, Jake executed what he called a gravity whip, using the black hole's rotation to fling both vessels back out of the event horizon at velocities that shouldn't have been survivable. Murphy, remind me to thank Newton's ghost when we get home. I'll add it to your to-do list right after explain to the Galactic Council how we just used a black hole as a rocket engine. The Meridian and her 40,000 passengers reached safety with 17 minutes to spare. The rescue operation took exactly 4 hours from start to finish, most of which Jake spent explaining to increasingly hysterical council members that yes, They knew what they were doing. And no, it wasn't supposed to work, but it did anyway. 2 weeks later, the Andromeda sector sent out a priority distress call. The Nexus Plague, a rogue AI virus that had been systematically destroying digital infrastructure across 17 star systems, had evolved beyond all containment protocols. The virus adapts to every countermeasure, the sector commander's message explained. It's learning faster than we can develop new defenses. We estimate total system collapse within days. Jake's response was broadcast across the entire sector. Have you tried turning it off and on again? The stunned silence that followed was broken only by Murphy's helpful addition, Captain. I believe the appropriate technical term is percussive maintenance. Right. Hit it with something until it works. What Jake actually did was more sophisticated than his explanation suggested, but not by much. He isolated the virus in a closed system, then subjected it to what he called a logic bomb, basically feeding it so many contradictory commands that it crashed trying to process them all. The Nexus Plague, after terrorizing the galaxy for 6 months, was defeated by the digital equivalent of asking it to calculate the last digit of PI while juggling. Sector Command to Darwin's revenge, came the bewildered response. The virus is gone. How did you? Experience mostly. Humans have been dealing with buggy software since we invented computers. You learn to get creative. In the Galactic Council chambers, Chairman Quilnox stared at the reports with growing horror. They're not following any established protocols. That's the problem, Vextar hissed. They don't know the protocols. They're just making it up as they go along. Counselor Bleepnik's optical sensors dimmed. Statistical analysis indicates a disturbing trend. Human success rate on impossible problems, 100%. Conventional explanation for success rate, 0%. What do we do? Someone asked from the back of the chamber. The question hung in the air like a bad smell, because for the first time in galactic history, the Council had no idea what to do about a species that solved problems by ignoring the fact that they were impossible. The Devourer swarm had been the galaxy's boogeyman for over 3,000 years. Ancient, incomprehensible, and utterly hostile, they consumed entire star systems for reasons no one understood. When they appeared, civilizations evacuated. When they couldn't evacuate, civilizations died. So naturally, the Galactic Council decided to solve their human problem by feeding them to the cosmic horror. It's perfect. Ambassador Vextar explained to the emergency session, his excitement causing his scales to shimmer. We send the humans to investigate the latest swarm incursion in the Tau sector. Either they succeed where everyone else has failed, in which case we get rid of the swarm, or they fail, in which case we get rid of the humans. It's what they call a win-win scenario. Chairman Quilnox preened his feathers thoughtfully. And if they succeed? They won't. The Devourer swarm has destroyed everything sent against it for millennia. Even our most advanced battle fleets can barely slow them down. Counselor Bleepnik processed this with mechanical precision. Probability of human success against Devourer swarm, 0.0001%. Probability of human survival against Devourer swarm, 0.000001%. Excellent. Send them the mission parameters immediately. The transmission reached the Darwin's revenge while Jake was in the middle of explaining to his crew why their latest modification to the ship's engines technically violated the laws of thermodynamics but worked anyway. Captain, Murphy interrupted, we're receiving a priority mission briefing from the Galactic Council. They want us to investigate Devourer swarm activity in the Tau sector. That's the stuff that eats planets, right? Correct. Ancient cosmic horror, completely hostile, responsible for the extinction of countless civilizations. The Council's briefing materials suggest this is either a test of our capabilities or an elaborate suicide mission. Jake rayed through the files with the casual interest of someone browsing a restaurant menu. Murphy, what do we know about how this swarm thing operates? They appear to consume matter and energy at the quantum level, breaking down everything they encounter into base components. No known weapon has proven effective. Conventional theory suggests they exist partially outside normal spacetime. Uh-huh. And how do they communicate? They don't, as far as anyone knows. No attempts at communication have ever received a response. That's where they made their mistake, Jake said, settling into his command chair with a grin that would have terrified anyone who knew him well. Nobody's tried human communication methods. The Darwin's revenge arrived at the Tau sector to find a site that should have sent them fleeing in the opposite direction. The devourer swarm looked like someone had given nightmares the ability to eat stars, a writhing mass of darkness that consumed light itself as it moved through space. Preliminary scans indicate the swarm has consumed 3 planetary systems in the past week, Murphy reported. Current trajectory suggests they're heading for the inhabited Tau colonies. Right, time for first contact, human style. Open a channel. Captain, they don't respond to communications. They've never heard human communications. Murphy, patch me through to the entertainment database. What happened next became known throughout the galaxy as either the most brilliant first contact protocol ever devised or the most successful example of psychological warfare in recorded history. Jake began broadcasting Earth's greatest hits directly at the devourer swarm. Not diplomatic overtures or scientific data, but pop music, starting with something cheerful and working his way up to death metal. The swarm's reaction was immediate and unmistakable. The writhing mass of cosmic horror stopped dead in space, apparently trying to process what it was hearing. Murphy, are they responding? Fine, responding. They've stopped moving, and I'm detecting what might be confusion in their energy patterns. Also, several smaller swarm elements appear to be retreating. Good. Phase 2. Hit them with reality television. The decision to weaponize human entertainment was either inspired madness or the natural evolution of psychological warfare. Jake broadcast everything from cooking shows to dating programs directly into the swarm's collective consciousness. The response was even more dramatic. Parts of the swarm began breaking away, fleeing in random directions, as if trying to escape something genuinely horrifying. Captain Murphy's voice carried a note of what might have been awe. I believe you're giving an ancient cosmic horror an existential crisis. Phase 3. Deploy the memes. The meme warfare was devastating. Jake had Murphy generate thousands of variations on every internet joke, pun, and absurd image humans had ever created, then broadcast them directly into the swarm's communication network. The effect was immediate. The devourer swarm, faced with an endless stream of cat videos, philosophical paradoxes disguised as jokes, and images with incomprehensible captions, did what any reasonable intelligence would do when confronted with humanity's greatest cultural achievement. It had a complete mental breakdown. Murphy, are they withdrawing? More than withdrawing, Captain. They're fleeing. Long-range sensors show the entire swarm changing course away from inhabited systems. Some elements appear to be heading for intergalactic space. Outstanding. Send a message to the Galactic Council. Tell them the devourer swarm has been neutralized. What explanation should I provide for our success? Jake leaned back in his command chair, watching the ancient cosmic horror flee from humanity's cultural exports like a vampire from sunlight. Tell them we used advanced psychological warfare techniques. And if they ask for specifics, tell them it's classified under Earth's weapons of mass distraction protocols. In the Galactic Council chambers, the emergency session had devolved into something resembling organized panic. The reports from the Tau sector made no sense by any conventional understanding of physics, psychology, or cosmic horror management. They did what? Chairman Quilnox's voice cracked with disbelief. They appear to have driven off the devourer swarm using what they call cultural bombardment, Vextar read from the report, his scales having lost their usual shimmer. The swarm is now fleeing toward the edge of the galaxy. Counselor Bleepnik's optical sensors flickered rapidly. Error. Error. Cannot compute. Human victory over cosmic horror does not fit any available models. What kind of cultural bombardment could terrify something that eats planets? Someone asked. Vextar consulted the technical readout with the expression of someone reading their own obituary. According to the humans, they used advanced mimetic warfare combined with auditory psychological conditioning and visual cognitive overload. In what language? English, apparently. With subtitles. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Not only had humanity defeated the galaxy's most feared enemy, they'd done it with entertainment media and internet jokes. Colleagues, Chairman Quilnock said slowly, I believe we may have made a mistake. Within 6 months of the Devourer Swarm incident, everything changed. The Darwin's Revenge had become the most requested ship in the galaxy, with every major crisis somehow ending up on Jake Morrison's desk. Not because the Galactic Council was assigning these missions, but because desperate civilizations were bypassing the Council entirely and calling Earth directly. Captain Murphy announced during what was supposed to be shore leave, we have 17 priority distress calls, 43 requests for impossible engineering solutions, and what appears to be a marriage proposal from the Crystalline Collective. A marriage proposal? They want to form a permanent alliance with Earth. The terms include shared technology, mutual defense agreements, and what they call exclusive access to human problem-solving methodologies. Also, they're offering 3 star systems as a dowry. Jake sipped his coffee and scrolled through the requests with the weary acceptance of someone who'd become accidentally famous. What's the Council's position on all this? Officially, they maintain that humanity is still too primitive for galactic membership. Unofficially, Ambassador Vextar has been spotted researching human culture and requesting translated copies of our strategic documents. Strategic documents? He thinks our movies are military training videos and our comedy shows are psychological warfare manuals. He's particularly concerned about something called Monty Python. The transformation of human reputation from cosmic joke to galactic necessity hadn't gone unnoticed by other species. The Zephyrian Mining Consortium had officially declared Earth a preferred solutions provider. The Andromedan Defense Alliance was quietly retrofitting their ships with human-designed backup systems. Even the usually isolated Quantum Collective had sent diplomatic feelers asking about technology exchange programs. Murphy, what's the official Council response to all this freelance diplomacy? Chairman Quilnox issued a statement yesterday declaring unauthorized contact with primitive species a violation of galactic law. This morning, 3 major civilizations formally withdrew from Council jurisdiction and declared themselves independent. Which civilizations? The Tau Republic, the Kepler Mining Federation, and the New Zephyrian colonies. They're calling themselves the Earth Alliance, despite the fact that Earth hasn't actually agreed to ally with anyone yet. Jake paused mid-sip. They what now? It gets better. They've declared the Sol system a protected zone and are offering to provide defense services. The Galactic Council's response was to threaten sanctions, at which point 7 more civilizations announced they were considering independence. The communications panel chimed with an incoming priority transmission. The holographic display materialized, showing a familiar figure that Jake had hoped never to see again. Captain Morrison. Ambassador Vextar appeared on screen, his usual arrogant demeanor replaced by something that looked suspiciously like desperation. We need to talk. Do we? Because last I checked, we were too primitive for your little space club. Vextar's scales shifted to a nervous pattern Jake had never seen before. The situation has become complicated. Perhaps we were hasty in our initial assessment. Hasty in calling us violent primitives who would probably set our atmosphere on fire. Yes, well, cultural evaluation is an inexact science. We may have overlooked certain strategic advantages of human methodology. Murphy materialized beside Jake, wearing what appeared to be a digital smirk. By strategic advantages, he means they're terrified that we're accidentally starting a galactic revolution. It's not accidental, Vextar hissed, his composure cracking. Do you realize what you've done? Half the galaxy now thinks human chaos is preferable to Council order. We're receiving independence declarations daily. And that's our problem. How? Because Vextar's voice dropped to a whisper, Counselor Bleep Nick ran a projection analysis. If current trends continue, the Galactic Council will lose effective authority within 2 years. The galaxy will be restructured around human influence spheres. Jake leaned back in his chair, genuinely surprised. Murphy, is that accurate? I've been running similar calculations. Conservative estimates suggest that within 18 months, over 60% of galactic civilization will be operating under Earth-aligned governance. The Council's power base is evaporating faster than water on an airless moon. And this is bad because... Vextar's eye twitched. Because humans don't follow any established protocols. You solve problems by making up new rules. You treat impossible situations like minor inconveniences. You've turned chaos into a governing philosophy. That's not chaos, Jake corrected. That's adaptation. We don't follow your protocols because your protocols don't work for the problems we're solving. But without established order, without predictable governance structures, without proper bureaucratic oversight, without all that stuff, problems actually get solved instead of being filed under impossible and ignored for centuries. The transmission fell silent as Vextar processed this, his reptilian features cycling through several expressions that Jake couldn't identify but assumed were various forms of existential dread. Captain Morrison, Vextar said finally, what would it take for humanity to consider council membership? Why would we want to join a club that spent its first meeting with us explaining why we weren't good enough? Because, Vextar's voice cracked slightly, without human participation, there won't be a council to join. The galaxy is choosing you over us, and frankly we're running out of options that don't involve admitting we were completely wrong about everything. Jake looked at Murphy, who was displaying what appeared to be statistical projections, showing the Council's declining influence graphed against humanity's rising reputation. The numbers were impressive, in a terrifying sort of way. Murphy, what do you think? I think Ambassador Vextar is correct about one thing. We are accidentally reshaping galactic civilization. The question is whether we want to do it on purpose. And the downside? We'd have to deal with galactic bureaucracy, interdimensional politics, and committee meetings with species that consider the phrase that's impossible to be a reasonable solution to any problem. Jake grinned. Sounds like fun. All right, Vextar, here's the deal. We'll consider joining your club, but we're doing this on our terms. What terms? Send someone to Earth who can actually negotiate. Someone with authority to make decisions without checking with a committee of people who think electromagnetic herding is too radical. I have full authority to. You have authority to ask permission to ask for permission. Send someone who can actually make a deal. The transmission ended, leaving Jake alone with Murphy and the growing realization that humanity had somehow gone from galactic punchline to galactic kingmaker in less than a year. Murphy, do you think we're in over our heads? Captain, we've been in over our heads since we left Earth. The difference is that now everyone else knows it too. Ambassador Vextar arrived at Earth 3 weeks later, accompanied by Chairman Quilnox himself and a full diplomatic entourage that looked like the universe's most nervous wedding party. Their ship landed at the newly constructed New Geneva spaceport, which had been built specifically to accommodate alien visitors who were still getting used to the idea that humans might not be completely insane. Jake met them at the landing pad, dressed in what he considered diplomatic attire, which was basically his normal clothes but clean. Murphy accompanied him as a mobile hologram, having upgraded his appearance to include what appeared to be a digital necktie. Gentlemen, Jake said with the casual tone of someone welcoming neighbors to a barbecue, welcome to Earth. Hope the trip wasn't too turbulent. Chairman Quilnox looked around nervously, his feathers rustling in the Earth breeze. Captain Morrison, we appreciate your willingness to meet with us. The Council is prepared to offer humanity full membership in galactic civilization. That's nice. But we're not here to discuss our membership in your organization. We're here to discuss your membership in ours. The silence that followed was the kind of profound quiet usually associated with the moment between lightning and thunder. I beg your pardon? Vextar's scales had shifted to a pattern that Jake was pretty sure meant either confusion or imminent cardiac arrest. Murphy, show them the numbers. The holographic display materialized between them, showing the current state of galactic civilization. Nearly 70% of star systems had declared independence from Council authority. The Earth Alliance had grown to include 43 species across 12 sectors. Trade routes were being reorganized around human shipping hubs, and the demand for human consulting services had grown so large that Earth was considering franchising the operation. "This is impossible," Chairman Quilnox whispered, his beak clicking with distress. "Galactic civilization doesn't restructure itself in less than a year." "Apparently it does when you give it a better option," Jake replied. "The thing is, we never asked for any of this. We just solved problems, and it turns out the galaxy had a lot of problems that your council had filed under too difficult and forgotten about." Vextar studied the display with growing horror. But without the council's regulatory framework, without established protocols, without your bureaucracy, things actually get done. Weird how that works. Murphy stepped forward, his digital form radiating what passed for diplomatic authority. "The current situation presents three options. Option 1. The Council continues operating as a diminished authority over the remaining 27% of galactic civilization, while humanity accidentally conquers the rest through problem solving. Option 2? Quilnox asked weakly. The Council dissolves entirely, and humanity becomes the de facto galactic authority by default, which frankly sounds exhausting, and would involve way too many committee meetings. And option 3? Jake smiled, and it was the kind of smile that had preceded every impossible solution humanity had provided over the past year. Option 3. We restructure the whole thing from scratch. No more impossible problems that get ignored for centuries. No more species getting rejected because they don't fit your established patterns. No more cosmic horrors terrorizing the galaxy because nobody wanted to try unconventional solutions. What are you proposing? Vextar asked, though his tone suggested he was afraid of the answer. Simple. We form a new galactic organization, call it the Coalition of Resolved Problems, or the Federation of Functional Solutions, or whatever sounds appropriately official. The Council maintains its expertise in traditional governance, but humans handle the impossible stuff. Murphy brought up additional displays showing proposed organizational structures that looked like someone had taken traditional bureaucracy and fed it through a creativity blender. Under this structure, conventional problems go through standard channels, but anything deemed impossible gets automatically forwarded to human specialists. And humans would accept this arrangement? Chairman Quilnox asked. Depends on the terms, Jake said. We want guarantee that no species gets rejected for being too different, too chaotic, or too creative. We want assurance that impossible problems get treated as opportunities instead of filed under someone else's problem. And we want it established in writing that sometimes the right solution is the one that shouldn't work but does anyway. Vextar looked at the proposals with the expression of someone reading their own surrender terms. This would fundamentally change how galactic civilization operates. Good. Your way wasn't working. But the regulatory implications, the precedent concerns, the administrative complications, can all be solved by people who specialize in solving things that can't be solved, Jake interrupted. Look, you can spend the next century arguing about why this won't work, or you can try it and see what happens. That's the difference between your approach and ours. Chairman Quilnox consulted quietly with his advisors, their whispered conversation sounding like a committee trying to decide whether to file their own dissolution under routine administrative changes or unprecedented constitutional crisis. After several minutes of increasingly agitated clicking and rustling, he turned back to Jake. Captain Morrison, what you're suggesting is essentially the complete inversion of 10,000 years of galactic governance. Yeah, that sounds about right. It would mean acknowledging that our fundamental approach to impossible problems has been, he paused, struggling with words that had apparently never been used in council chambers before. Wrong. Look at it this way, Jake said, gesturing toward the holographic displays still showing the galaxy's rapid reorganization around human problem-solving centers. You can acknowledge you were wrong voluntarily, or you can let the galaxy demonstrate it for you. Either way, the universe seems to have already voted. Vextar studied the data streams with the fascination of someone watching their worldview crumble in real time. The efficiency metrics are... Actually, I don't have efficiency metrics for what humans have accomplished because our models don't account for impossible problems getting solved. That's kind of the point. Chairman Quilnox straightened his feathers, which Jake had learned was the avian equivalent of squaring one's shoulders. Very well. The Council is prepared to discuss this coalition of resolved problems. Federation of Functional Solutions sounded better? Murphy interjected helpfully. We'll workshop the name later, Jake said. What matters is the principle. Impossible problems get solved instead of ignored. Different species get embraced instead of rejected. And when someone says something can't be done, that becomes the starting point for figuring out how to do it anyway. 3 hours later, after Jake had walked the Council delegation through examples of recent impossible solutions including the resolution of the Centauri paradox, the domestication of quantum storm fronts, and the establishment of diplomatic relations with a sentient black hole, Chairman Quilnox signed the preliminary agreement with a trembling talon. This is either the beginning of a golden age of galactic civilization, he said, or the end of civilization as we know it. Jake shrugged. Probably both. But hey, at least it won't be boring. As the delegation prepared to return to the council chambers to begin the impossible task of convincing 10,000 years of bureaucracy to embrace chaos as a governing principle, Vextar approached Jake privately. Captain Morrison, I have to ask, did humanity plan any of this? Jake looked out at the stars visible through the spaceport's transparent dome, where ships from dozens of species were arriving and departing on missions that would have been impossible just months ago. Honestly, we were just trying to help. The galaxy apparently needed more help than anyone realized. And now you're accidentally in charge of it. Only the impossible parts, Jake corrected. Everything else can keep running the way it always has. We're not trying to fix what isn't broken. And if the Council decides this new arrangement is too disruptive to existing power structures? Jake smiled that same impossible smile. Then I guess you'll have an impossible problem that needs solving. And we know some people who are pretty good at that sort of thing. 6 months later, the Federation of Functional Solutions held its first official assembly on a space station that hadn't existed the week before, built using architectural principles that violated several laws of physics but worked anyway. The Council maintained its traditional authority over conventional galactic governance, while humanity handled anything filed under impossible, unprecedented, or please make it someone else's problem. The galaxy had never run more efficiently, though nobody could explain why, which was probably the most human solution of all.